Oxford TCC is an official language certificate based on the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages that assesses the 5 main English language skills: use of English, reading, listening, writing, and speaking. Its final objective is to certify candidates in these skills at any level from A1 to C2. In addition to being an official certificate, the Oxford TCC helps candidates identify their areas of improvement through its 3-step process. Diagnostic. Its main objective is to detect the candidate's initial English level within the CEFR. Mock. Verifies the candidate's English level obtained in the diagnostic and also provides practice before the final exam. Certification. It certifies the candidate's English skills in the level obtained. It includes a speaking examination which is carried out by native English speakers. What are the benefits of having the Oxford TCC in your school? The price is accessible. The cost is the same for all levels. Examination dates are available all year round. The school decides when to apply the exams. The digital results are sent 5 days after taking the exam, and candidates will receive the exact percentages obtained in each of the skills tested. The physical copy of the certificate is delivered 3 weeks after finalizing the process, including the speaking assessment. The whole process takes place within the school facilities. The Oxford TCC is the best option for certifying the English level of students and teachers alike. Do you know the game Risk? Risk is a strategy board game with the ultimate goal of conquering the world. Gear is very similar. Gear is the world that each student tries to conquer by completing English exercises. Gear is the new digital platform that includes exercises based on the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, designed to improve the student's English level. It includes practice exercises for the entirety of the school year. You can see the students' progress with personalized and thorough reports. Much more interactive platform. Recap section where students are able to retake the exercises that were the most challenging for them. The teacher has full control of the user's progress on the platform and their calendar. More exercises, more content, and much, much more. Do you want to conquer the world of English?
Okay, perfect. Um, So hello everyone, my name is Gabriela Velasquez. I work in the sales team of BEO and I will be the moderator today. Let me introduce you to Gabriela Daniels. She's the MBA program director in the University of the Arts in London, and she will be talking about teaching without borders. What can we learn from each other? So please welcome her.
So, hello everyone. Gabi, shall I start?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, maybe, to some of you. And for me, it will be practically good evening. Thank you so much for joining my talk. And I do hope you find it interesting. I'm speaking to you from my home in London. I'm working from home, I'm teaching from home, in this really strange world we find ourselves in. I'm following our government's rules on social distancing at the moment, and I imagine many of you are doing exactly the same, working from home and trying to keep your families and your students safe. So I'll be delighted to talk to you about my teaching experience, but firstly just to say thank you to BEO for inviting me to speak to you at this event. I have spent 20 years developing and launching international university programs for global audiences of students, and this experience has given me some interesting insights into the student psyche, but also into how different national school systems and cultures and teaching styles have influenced students' learning approaches. So firstly, I want to say a bit about how you have to consider whether one size fits all approach works in a classroom. And for me, it's obviously a lecture room or group of students who are coming from different countries. So I'll start with this little example. When I lecture, I of course try to give my best explaining, giving examples of theory, and then in the end of my lecture, I would be very tempted, and I'd often ask my students one big question. And that question is, have you got any questions? And this seems like a very obvious step in the teaching process. Of course, we as teachers would like to know if our students understood what we said. But actually, I have learned now that no Chinese students, for example, is ever going to respond to such question, or is never going to ask me a question in the classroom. Firstly, I assume they're mostly shy people. And then I spent some time researching Chinese education, and I realized that this is the approach of students is kind of due to the way they have learned to behave in classrooms in China. So I learned that in China, teachers ask questions more as a part of problem identification process, as opposed to engaging students in a conversation. So for the Chinese students to have a question for the teacher may have meant admitting a failure in front of everyone. So I started thinking perhaps this is not the best way to find out if they understood everything and what I can do for you. So that's just kind of one little example of influences of different culture over students' behavior. And actually, I'd like to pose a question to all of you, the teachers who are with me today, to maybe make note, firstly in the chat box, whether you ask your students if they understood everything and whether they have any questions for you, or whether you prefer not to ask this direct question in the end of your classes. And whichever way you do it, I'm just interested to hear why you do it that way. So if you make some comments in the chat box, we'll look at these when I finish the talk. To me, it's quite a fundamental question. So talking about my work, basically, I often talk to students in a way that your education is a journey. education is a journey. And I've taken this phrase from American philosopher and writer called Ralph Emerson. He actually said, life is a journey, not a destination. You may have heard this before. And I quite like the phrase, so I kind of adopted it to talk to my students about the way they need to look at their time at university. And for some people, education is a straight journey. They can see far ahead and they can actually seamlessly progress along this long straight road that I'm illustrating to you at the moment. But actually for some other students, education is like a winding mountain road, or even like a path in the jungle. The end is not clear and there are many obstacles on the way. So it's a long journey as well, but the good news is, of course, nobody is alone. The students have you as the teachers and their friends and family to support them, to help them, to nudge them along the way and make sure they get to these destinations in the faraway places that they want to be. For some of the students, of course, the parts of the journey are quite familiar. The landscape's really kind of close to home. And we know sometimes several generations of families go to the same school. But nowadays, a lot of the students eventually reach a point where their educational journey crosses borders, continents and oceans, and they find themselves in this new unfamiliar place. My job is to work with students who are that far away from home point in their educational journey. In universities in the UK and in London in particular, you'll find incredibly multinational mix of students, but we tend not to refer to them as representatives of different nationalities. We think mostly about the fact that they are representatives of different cultures and different educational backgrounds. So I'll share today with you two key things about how I work with my students who come from all over the world. And in doing that, I really hope to help you or to give you some helpful advice rather. I'm sure you're doing a really good job already, to prepare your students in a way of making them more adaptable, more resilient, and more university ready. So firstly, I'll talk a little bit about the challenges that the students face when they come to London, learning in such kind of new and multicultural environment. Then I'd like to say what actually I do to help them overcome the challenges and make the best out of this part of the educational and life journey. So a few things about London. About 60% of the students I teach in my lectures are actually not from the UK. And I had, like yesterday, I had a lecture, a virtual lecture, of course, and my students were from Canada, Singapore, China, quite a few from different European countries. And actually my UK students, some of them are from Pakistani origin, of course, some were English. So, and of course, because this was a virtual lecture, some had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning in order to listen to my live lecture. So interestingly though, I mean, we do hope to have live lectures soon, next year for sure. And that's why I wanted to show you on this slide also a central London location. Because I know you work in partner schools of the BEO World Programme. You know a lot of London locations, you've probably been there. This is actually Oxford Circus on a photo, which is a very famous crossroad in the middle of London. And the second building on the right there is actually the building I teach most often in. So I just wanted to share this photo because I thought, you know, you should think about what students imagine when they plan their university life. So I know from my students, when they were thinking of coming to study in London, they're mentally preparing themselves by seeing photos like this, looking at blue skies, red buses, bustling streets, thinking of drinking cream tea, watching the Queen's Guard, all this kind of fun things. But actually, in reality, London is a cultural melting pot. More than 50% of London residents were not born in the UK. And actually, soaking up this atmosphere in the first few months can be quite overwhelming for people. And of course, there would be some disappointments too, like the red buses are too hot and too slow, coffee is quite expensive, and of course, it rains a lot. So these are some of the observations my international students share with me, and believe me, they can interfere with their academic work, somewhat at least. But there are more difficult challenges ahead, and in particular, having to take responsibilities for certain things and actions which previously a good teacher or family member will have taken care of. And there are loads of new situations for them. And I'll kind of give you a few examples along the way of such situations. So to kick off the kind of list of most important challenges, I actually wanted to share with you this study, or the most important findings of a study conducted in 2018. So it's quite recent. Several UK university students several UK universities were included in the study, and students from many countries were included in the study, and they were representative of very different subjects. There were science students, art students, business students, and humanities students. And altogether, despite the differences in their disciplines of studies, the students produced some clear kind of indication of what they found to be the most difficult and challenging aspect of studying at university in England. And these were meeting deadlines, managing workload, written coursework, and working in teams. So to unpack these points, I just wanted to actually give you some examples, but I'll talk about the first two together because to me, they're always very tightly connected. So students do come to university without realistic concept of time and workload management. And perhaps coming to university is one important step in developing these, but there's no harm having some preparation. So I have concluded that the two factors beyond the family background that may have a good impact on the student's ability to manage workload and deadlines. And they're both linked to some of the school activities they get engaged with. The first one is just getting students to do a lot of extracurriculum activities, because that provides sense of ownership of time management and ability to plan things outside the classroom. And the second one is the school's culture towards completion of any academic work within the time allocated. So altogether, teaching students the value of the currency of time is something more schools should do everywhere and at all levels. And just to inject a bit of humor to this, we know different cultures have somewhat different approaches to planning and using time in a kind of particular way. Like in Europe, the Northern Europeans very often make joke about the more relaxed kind of way of doing things in Southern Europe. And the Southern Europeans make jokes about the Northern Europeans being too formal in planning and doing anything. And I have some of these national quirks manifesting in my classroom too. Like my Italian student last year was, one of them was very unhappy. She had to work in such prescriptive way. She had no time to be creative, to explore some ideas, whilst her British teammates were getting stressed out that things weren't happening at the right time, the way they wanted to. So I have to manage some of these attitudes in a way that they still produce good learning outcome for everybody. But by far the bigger challenge for many students is actually writing assignments and the time management they need to put in doing that. And I know writing is something most students don't like. Actually, yesterday in the talk I gave to your colleagues, a lot of them shared the same thing. They said students just don't like to write anything really. So what do we do? I was actually trained as a chemical engineer. So in my university time, I did very little writing. And although I was quite good at school, I just kind of lost the skill of writing whilst I was at university. And I stopped appreciating how important it was to write well. But then people still can argue, and you know, a lot of young people do that good written coursework is not necessary for all types of studies or all professions. And I know my own teenage son says to me, I really don't want to be a journalist, so I don't really care how well I can write. And I say, no, you still have to do your English language homework really well. It's important. So it's a bit of a kind of tough nut to crack, but I always try to tell all my students and my children that good communication skills in writing and talking are really, really essential for our multi-connected and knowledge-driven world. So learning to express yourself and to express your ideas, your knowledge accurately, clearly, in a compelling manner is so useful for the professional journeys that begin after university. Here, culture plays a good part too, because communications in different parts of the world are not quite the same. For example, the skill of public speaking is much more valued in the West than in the East. And actually, I know there are differences in the language style used as well. So it is more common to be addressed informally in the West, and more formal language is used in the East. So my students, depending on where they come from, when they send me emails, some of them will be going, hi, hello, Gabriela. There will be mostly the Westerners, and the students from India or China will be emailing me saying, dear Gabriela. So I'm used to these differences, and I understand students are only doing what they kind of know is the right way to do. And I don't kind of take particular notice of this particular language they used to email me, but I teach them then that it's still important to consider, if you write to different people that you don't know, what is the right language and how to adapt it once you've received some responses from the other side. So the other big challenge on that slide is the group assignment, and that is also a tough nut to crack. The culture of the university education in the UK is hugely focused on learning to work via group work, via group activities, and placing huge emphasis on the social learning as a whole element of the students' university experience. So there's an enormous pressure on obviously students, which I think is a little unfair sometimes. It doesn't really mean that the British students know how to work in teams from school, not at all, but it simply means that they have a little bit of a home turf advantage because they're more likely to bond quickly over chatter about TV programs or football teams, so they just hit it off and they're friends. But for the international students, a light chat like this can be a bit of a killer. So if you think of it, even now, I deliberately used a few casual phrases like home turf, killer, hit it off. They're fun and they're conversational, but actually for some students, having to use such language in social environment will be quite difficult, and that will of course stop the enjoyment from doing things with other people. So to put aside the language challenge though, teamwork has some interesting other aspects which are quite daunting but important for students to overcome as challenges. Firstly, they have to learn to do things in a way that are of acceptable standard to their peers, because they have to share workload and they have to show each other's workload. So in that case, their work gets judged not by the teacher, firstly, but by their peers. And actually, I find that a lot of students are really worried about that. And actually, they find that more scary than submitting assignments and reading your grades and assessments in the privacy of their rooms. So that's one important thing, challenge to overcome. And the second one is just having to put your trust in others, sometimes in complete strangers, and in some respect to lose control over the process of learning the way you say it is quite difficult. And here the attitudes towards doing things with others or what they've learned to do at school, the cultural kind of influences on time management and communications could be quite important to take into account, at least from my point of view, when I organize students' teamwork. Okay, so far I told you about lots of problems and challenges, so I'll just move to some of my solutions to see what I could do for, what I do for my students. So firstly, the workload management and meeting assessment deadlines. Now, I try not to kind of leave students do a lot of things completely independently until a big formal assessment comes up. What I try to do is give them a lot of short-term projects to complete along the way in teams normally, and I expect them to present some small outcomes along the way together, normally again in the team, as the team has been formed by me in the first place. So a lot of research I've read shows that students have the ability to learn from each other, which is kind of equally good. You may say, well, little they know. Well, they may not be experts in certain subject, but they do know certain things, maybe more than we can sometimes gather from our formal assessment. So there is the merit of letting them help each other and do things together. And this type of collaboration actually helps make the learning more effective, deeper, and long-lasting. So I do give a lot of mini projects which take 2 to 3 weeks, and I place students in the teams, normally 4 students or 5 students maximum. And I insist that they stick to my deadlines, even though I give them the chance to decide on other things, such as maybe kind of a nuance to my topic. They can choose to take one option or another. And I also let them choose more often now how they will present the outcome of their work. I realized that actually giving students a chance to choose on the format of these presentations gives them power, gives them sense of control, most importantly, gives them motivation. So this is one of my tips for you, I guess. See if you can give some kind of degree of autonomy to students to do certain things in the process of learning in the form or in the way they find most engaging and most interesting for them. So that's kind of the way I try to help students' time management, by helping them with breaking down tasks, learning things in small kind of chunks, practicing things in a way that is safe before they approach big assessment deadlines. What I also try to do is I try to help with writing a little bit. We said writing was quite tedious task for many students, and they procrastinate, they lose a lot of time that could have been used to start planning at least the assessment, and it kind of ties back with the time management and meeting deadline issue. So what I try to do with writing is I kind of see what students have produced before, and I tend to give them some advice based on their previous experience. And actually, they're really interesting moments that I've experienced looking at what students used to do and trying to help them adapt to UK education expectations. So, for example, I had a French student a couple of years ago maybe one of the first in my class, and my assessment was to write a 2,500 words report. So in the UK, all written assessment requires students to write within certain time limit. I've not come across anyone running written assessments with kind of open-ended prescription about how many words to write or how many pages to write. There's always a limit on the words used. So this student actually hadn't had any such experience at school and his pre-university course. And he always thought that the more he writes, the better his grades are likely to be. So when I first asked him to make sure he writes within the 2,500 words word count, he found that extremely challenging and stressful because he thought that was undermining his ability to perform. And I had to take some time to explain to him that writing in a clear, sharp manner is a good skill to have, as well as writing a lot. So that's kind of one thing to look at when you make students plan and write. It is more better, or is it less is better in some cases? I also pay some attention on students, pay quite a lot of attention on students' oral presentation skills. I already mentioned we actually get them to present a lot to each other, but also I stage a lot of small presentations in front of different audiences so that they can learn to adapt the content and the way they present to the audience needs and level of understanding of the subjects they're presenting. And many students are extremely grateful for these opportunities, which are not all part of the formal assessment. There are some of these extracurriculum activities I try to put in place for them, just like I'm sure you do too. Finally, I'm coming to the point of teamwork. I already said I do put a lot of homework or kind of project work out in teams. Excuse me, because I value that so much. But I have understood now very well that the experiences these people have in working together with other students or learning together with other students are really varied, and that we should begin the teamwork activities always with some kind of introduction to what a good team is like, to the fact that in each team there typical team dynamics and typical team roles. And once they become aware of these principles of working together, they could be more confident about their approaches. And importantly, I tell them that the difference in the way people from different cultures think and do things are not actually a problem or a challenge. They're actually a strength, because there's a strength in the diversity of skills and the strength in the diversity of experiences they bring to the team. So when I set teams, I make sure that they students in the teams are usually kind of from different parts of the world, and I also make sure that people don't end up talking with or working on the in the same kind of teams for a long period of time. I just kind of mix them constantly. And I know, for example, that students from Singapore will be really good in planning experiments and preparing, researching. Students from England will be quite good at putting out a lot of ideas, and Spanish students are quite good at putting presentations together. So when I decide on the teams, I make sure I tell students that what I have in mind is not to challenge them, but to give them the opportunity to learn from each other in the best possible way. But we also tell them a bit, as I said, what is it to be in a team? We give them some tools to cope with the situation. So this is kind of one way I have developed to make students work together. I'd like to hear anything interesting you have to share on this topic, because teamwork is one of my favorite pedagogic kind of topics. And just want to complete my talk saying, in a nutshell, you say to me, well, how do you actually teach your students? What can you say in the shortest possible way is the approach you have? I have to say, over years, I've developed this kind of mindset now that I pay less focus on my teaching, which means I don't really think that much about how to teach, or I do, but of course, not in the way I used to 20 years ago. And I've tried to shift the focus of my preparation towards how will the student learn? What will the student do? And in doing that, I think I've managed to give the students good strategies to manage the workload, to write better, to work with each other well. And when they do that well, they actually are very good at grasping their subject knowledge and developing it so that they're really successful in their future professions. So that's nearly the end of my talk. The last thing I would like to say is that the situation we find ourselves in with COVID-19 is, I am thinking sometimes, is this multicultural teaching environment going to happen again? Maybe we're going to have to do things differently, but I sincerely hope we won't have to change all of this, and we will continue to have really vibrant multicultural lecture rooms or events like the BEO events, because they're so important for young people. But at the same time, we should probably use technology in a way that enhances this experience, gives us a chance to reach out to more people and just develop better time management and communication skills, just in a slightly different way. So thank you so much for being with me. We'll kind of open this session for questions and discussion.
Okay, perfect. So if someone wants to say something or ask something, please just raise your hand and I will unmute your microphone. There's some questions in the chat. So what are the reasons?
Yeah, could we just quickly see what people said about asking questions in the end of their lectures, please? Just maybe.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so Carolina Cerrato said, I always ask questions as I go along, open and close questions, avoiding the typical yes answer. Then Ivana Tejeda said, yes, when you let them decide, it actually motivates students.
Yes.
And Faisal said, it's all about students and their needs.
Yes. Yeah.
Carolina reply, I agree, writing is also one of my students' weakest skills.
Yeah.
All my students can barely come to terms with 500 words they say.
That's funny. Okay, well, I mean, we can, when people come into talking, maybe we'll discuss this situation. Do we ask students, do we ask them if they want to ask questions, or what do we deal with, how do we deal with students who are maybe a little shy, or maybe just need time to digest in their own way what you've said, what you've taught them, and then the questions will emerge. There's so many different things that are happening in our classrooms at any point of time. Yeah. Okay, so maybe we'll move on to the questions now. I'll keep a little eye on the chat box now too, actually.
Sure. So the first question, what strategies work with adolescent students to be effective in collaborative work?
Okay. Well, that question came up yesterday, of course. I think the most important thing about collaboration is to say to students that it is really in their interest to learn to work with others, but also that in any collaborative work, the work of more than 2 or 3 people will be better, no doubt, than the work a single person can produce. This is not so easy to, I suppose, convince students to believe in, to buy into. but I often give students examples from previous years. I say, look at this, like maybe a presentation, maybe some kind of post. I say, this was produced by 4 people in this kind of context last year, and look at how good it is. So you should not worry that you're going to stop each other from doing good work. You are actually going to make something as good as this or even better. So I try to ease their worries by giving examples of what people can do together. Does this answer the question from the first question?
Yes. We don't have any more questions. If someone wants to share a question, please just text it in the chat, or if you want to speak, you can speak. Okay, perfect. So, Nestor, please.
Hello.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, my name is Nestor, and I'm talking from Venezuela, Valencia. Yes, I agree. I had the opportunity to study English in Canada, and one of the things that I found, and I agree with you, is that different cultures have different skills. For example, students from China or that part of the world, they're very good at grammar, writing, etc. But the speaking skills are really low. In our case, Spanish speakers or Latinos, we have that freedom to speak. On the other hand, our grammar and writing probably is not as good as other cultures. Since we start with these new strategies to work with our students, English, yes, we find a lot of material over the web. But one of the things that we also have to deal is that sometimes students don't feel like that attracted to work on grammar or things like that. And they find the easy way to complete the tasks. I mean, probably they wait for a student to do the work and then the rest of them copy the information that one of them did. So one of the strategies that I have included since we start with this new method of teaching, if we can call it that way, is by making my students write something. Some of them have started to complain, again, we have to write, again, we have to write. And what I had said to those ones, well, that's the only way that I can make sure that you're working and you are not copying from another student. But well, the important thing is that most of them have written, and I can check that is their work, because, well, first of all, there is not another essay, article, text completely the same as any other student. So I think that one of the benefits that this situation has brought me and my students is that I have focused more on their writing, and they are doing it. And I try to give them the feedback. Well, now it's it's their job to try to fix those problems that I find in the writing. But that's one of the things that I wanted to share. Thank you.
That's nice. Thank you. Yes, I think it's important to motivate them. So if you find the more fun tasks, even with the complaining, they're more likely to do them.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is, what is more difficult for a class to manage, primary or secondary students?
Oh, I've always thought the secondary school students are the most difficult to manage. But obviously the schools in different countries are different, but I think the fact is the age of the young people is such that it is most difficult for 2 reasons, in my view. It's partly because they really have too many broad interests, and the school is just too kind of prescriptive for them. And I think also it's the time when they worry too much about what other people say, like their friends. I'm sure many of you have also children, so it is important to continue to do well what you can do, like teach as well as you can, and be sure that even if you don't see the result of your hard work straight away, for example, you're doing all this kind of grammar exercises and students are not necessarily always doing them, or they're not doing them as well as you think they could, you think they have better potential. This is the case perhaps with many of them, but be sure if you do your job well, even if it doesn't look like it to you on day-to-day basis, they will be better one day when they go to university, because a lot of these skills, they just kind of take time to embed. And when the student moves to a new environment and has to apply this old skill in somewhat new way, and maybe they are motivated to do it in a better way at university because they've chosen their course. Like, it's not like in secondary school where they have to go to school and that's it. They go to university where they choose largely what they want to study. So the skills that they've learned at school will actually play an important part in their university education. And they will probably turn out to be better than you thought in some way in your time students had, achieved. So there's a lot to be said about certain skills and coming back to life and being really useful to people later. And I think that's one of the kind of approaches you should take. Motivate them, saying this will be useful to you in the future, and just be sure, be confident they will make use of the skills. I know that because I see them later.
Perfect, thank you. The next question is from Yvonne Romero. Can you elaborate on how to motivate students to work on collaborative basis?
Okay, well, I think there's several things to take into account. One of the key points is to vary projects or vary the activities. So one of the things is that you can't really ask people to repeat the same things. Ideally, the amount of work and partly the novelty of the different topics or projects should take away some of the concerns, the worries, the fears students have from having to work together. Because people like each other, but it's just the worry about what will happen, what will somebody else do, will it work? That's what stops people from, or young people in particular, from getting into a team project. So it's really important, I think, to explain to them that they're given this good job that they should complete within a certain period of time, that they can choose what to do, and that actually they will always produce something really good. And you know that because you've seen it happening over and over before. And also, I do think the students need to be told, even if they seem like not particularly keen on listening to you, they should be told how important it is to do things together. And they should value the differences different individuals bring to the team. So it's not just about cultural differences and how people from different countries are used to doing things. It's just about individuals having some preferences about the different tasks they do. And if we acknowledge some will be better, one person will be better doing one thing and another at another, and then tell them everybody's role in the team is important, and then they're more likely to be interested and less likely to be scared.
Thank you so much. Very good. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good luck. It doesn't go always totally smoothly, but I think they would actually appreciate being reassured that these projects always produce outcomes in the end, and they're usually good outcomes. I think if you tell them I do this every year and I know you're going to do it, they kind of okay about it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have to try so many different things, okay, in order to make it happen, but I'm more than willing to do it, okay? Thank you again. Very
You're
good.
welcome.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
I would like to say something. I was just reading on the chat box something that people said. During class, I'd like to summarize and share what students like and know. I think these are very good techniques. And what I can just add to it is, that's a posting by Samantha Rodriguez. And what I would say is that I actually like that too, but because I'm mindful of some students worrying about coming across as not being as smart as others, for example, when I ask people to summarize things or to write questions nowadays, I would distribute a paper, like give everyone a piece of paper and say, now on this piece of paper, write down 2 questions that really intrigued you about this lecture I gave you, something that just made you be interested in the topic, and or maybe something that you didn't quite understand. Just write it down, like, please explain more such and such thing. And then I collect the papers, I look through them, and in the next lecture I go through the questions the students have asked without naming anyone. In fact, the paper is actually anonymous. I said I don't really want to know who raised this question. And at the same time, I might say, oh, and by the way, many of you found such and such thing really interesting. Well, I thought you'd be interested in something else. By doing that, I kind of get everyone to have a go at commenting or putting opinion across or asking a question. You just have to give a little time for it in the end of a class.
Okay, very good. We have another question from Gloria Rivera. What can we do to maintain interested the little kids, for example, first grade?
Well, that's a good question. I don't feel I'm the expert to do that, although I do feel my university students do behave like first grade students occasionally. But I think to maintain interest, we have to be aware of the fact that actually human brain has its kind of ways of doing things, and we shouldn't push anyone, whether it's a young person, like a young child, or even someone at university level, to sit and listen passively to a lesson or to a lecture for a very long time. I feel after years of teaching, this is one of the ways to kind of make a lot of young people switch off very quickly. So I think for maintaining interest, it's always good to have some doing, which is why I said a bit less focus on teaching and more focus on learning. Always have some doing, something that kind of makes people get involved. You may have heard that, I think there's study on this, that our brains are designed that we can only listen properly for around 20 minutes max. But if we actually start writing and doing things, we are a lot more engaged for longer, which is what I suggest people do at all levels. And I try to do the same at university too, even though students are supposed to be grown-ups and are supposed to be able to concentrate. Actually, it's really hard. At least in a primary school, students are not allowed mobile phones. In lecture theatre, students on their mobile phones, their laptops, and God knows what else. So it's really hard to maintain their concentration, I'm sure. I hope I answered the question, even though I'm not experienced teaching.
Yes, yes, you did. Thank you. It's really hard to maintain them because they want to get up, they go outside, they come inside, and it takes me like 10 to 15 minutes, and we really need to do something different for them because we really need to work with them, because if not, they go. They just get up and go.
Yes, I like to work with them is a good thing, yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said I like the way you said to work with them, not to kind of work on them and make them do things. You have to work with them.
Yes.
And I have
Yes.
to do the same, honestly. I have to do the same. You might be, surprised to hear that. It is really hard to capture the attention and be involved with lectures and things for a very long time. I don't think university is that far away in a way of teaching practices, adaptation required for success than actually any teaching in primary or secondary grade is.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So another question is, how can we motivate and engage students who had learning difficulties in previous levels to improve their skills?
Okay, well, to this question, I really have to say that I don't know, because I think this is a very highly specialist area. I only have some limited experience with some students that which have dyslexia. So dyslexia is when you kind of can't manage writing and your reading is a bit slow, and it's a spectrum. So I have had students who are officially with dyslexia passport, but actually they seem to be extremely kind of competent in writing in particular, and other students who clearly had difficulties. So that's my own experience with learning disabilities. And the only thing I can say is that it's important to give them some tools. There are many tools to improve ability to read quickly or write, like using colors, using backgrounds of paper. Some students find it easier to type on computers rather than use pen and paper. But I'm not the expert. I just use some of these tools because that's what our specialist disability advisors have told me to do with my students.
Okay, there's a lot of thank you notes, like thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Then Ivana Tejeda said earlier you talk about how important it is for youth teamwork. In my country, kids are going to study from home during most of these years. What would be a nice solution to have them doing some teamwork?
Oh, this is the challenge. I mean, if anyone gave me a good idea how to do teamwork now, I'll just really, yeah, I don't know, I'll send you a postcard or a cake or something. I don't know. My answer is I really don't know, because at the moment, just like all of you, myself and my colleagues are struggling a little bit to find the best way to engage students. And we've been a little cautious trying to ask them to work in teams. That said, there were one or two projects which were already set in motion, and students were working in teams before the UK went into the lockdown and we stopped going to universities' buildings. So now what we've asked the students to do is to continue with their project together, but we have told them to give extra long time to respond to each other for certain things, because our students are in different time zones. So for you, I would say maybe don't think too much about trying to put teamwork activities in place. If you think it's going to be too complicated, I would encourage you to think of something students can do in groups of 2 or 3, which is like something they can make in 2 or 3 days time, not a long-term project, because they can socialize doing that. But I wouldn't put too much academic emphasis on it now, because I think we all we have to help each other with the social isolation and learning to live slightly differently. So it's good not to put important things like academic work down to communications via internet. Some students might just have really bad broadband, you know, they wouldn't be able to do the work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carolina Rato said there's a talk at 3 p.m. on learning difficulties. So if you want to
Absolutely, yeah.
join, yeah. Samantha Rodriguez, thank Gabriela for sharing your experience. I am taking with me the strategies and points of view to implement in my classes. I have another conference. Thank you so much. Yes, so we have finished the time. We're going to stay to read some comments. but if you have to leave for another conference, it's fine. So come on, say thank you. And Carolina Serrato said, Zoom has an option for doing teamwork online. You can split them into another classroom and you can keep an eye on them simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, I have some software where we can split students into groups and they can do things online and we can watch them. We've tried, but it's a little difficult. It seems like students at the moment are quite quiet in the virtual world. So maybe, I don't know, maybe in South America people are not that quiet, but in my virtual classrooms, people are a little quiet. It might be just getting used to this online talking protocol. So it's not working quite so well for the moment. So good luck to you. Okay.
Astrid Painting said about the students with special needs, the teacher programs a one-on-one class after the general group class that lets them express more privately their personal issues.
Well, this is again, yeah.
And you can also use Google Classroom presentations in Teams. I'm off to another webinar. Thank you so much for everything. Same feeling and the situation of Ivana. COVID-19 has been a thought thing to tackle some skills in our students, especially oral skills and abilities like teamwork.
Yeah.
And thank you for your answers and work. Thank you a lot. Thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you so much, Gabriela. Thanks, Professor Daniels, for your information. Thank you, Gabriela and BEO World for the opportunity. Thank you very much, Gabriela. Thank you for your comments. I need to go because I have to join another meeting.
Well, maybe if there are no other questions, maybe we just close. I want to wish everybody really good luck with your teaching for the rest of the school year. I wish you to be safe and healthy, you and your students. Thank you so much for being with me. Thank you, Gabby, for helping. I think it's been good experience for me to hear how you're doing things and to feel like we're all in the same boat, really. But yeah, good luck and stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Sheila.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining, and enjoy your other meetings.